Hello and welcome everybody to phase 2 of the positive behaviour support in early childhood professional learning. We thank very much the Regional Community Childcare Development Fund and Royalties for Regions as part of the Department of Primary Industries and Regional Development and Department of Communities who have made this training possible. This is phase 2 and we would recommend that you do phase 1 first. So if you haven't had a chance to, we would recommend you go and look at those videos, particularly those about defining the behaviour that we want children to do, because it makes a lot more sense to give kids specific behavioural feedback when we first worked out what we would like them to do. So if you haven't had a chance to go and look at those yet, we recommend that you do. And if you have defined what you want the kids in your service to do, then we can get onto how we can use specific behavioural feedback and effective praise to help kids be more successful with their behaviour and their social skills. So this is the phase 2 modules, as I've said, and this is module 2. Module 3, 4 and 5 we also have videos for. Module 1, the review of phase 1, we don't have a separate video for because all of the videos for module 1 are already on the internet. So I would like to begin with acknowledging the clever people that put together all of the research and resources that we have used. Missouri School-Wide Positive Behaviour Support, the Pyramid Model, and the PBIS National Technical Assistance Centre. We are very grateful to be able to use a lot of their images and resources in the development of this professional learning, so thank you to those good people. The focus for this session is on giving specific feedback to increase kids' behavioural success, and as part of that, to build reinforcement systems that support adults to use more specific feedback. So systems that support us to give more specific feedback that are group, that are individual, and systems that encourage staff to use this practice of giving specific behavioural feedback. So where does giving specific feedback or praise fit with the national quality standards? You can see it under the assessment guide for element 5.2.3 that assessors may observe children being acknowledged when they make positive choices in managing their behaviour. So investing your time in increasing your staff's skills at giving that specific positive feedback will assist you in meeting or exceeding the national quality standard element 5.2.3. So a note on the language, I use the language of praise and specific feedback somewhat interchangeably, but I am trying to use specific feedback more because it's actually a better descriptor of what we are doing when we give verbal acknowledgement of children's social and behavioural skills. So the difference between the two might sound like I'm kind of splitting hairs, but traditionally, praise has been things like good girl or good boy or good job or you're the best. And those kind of things are okay. But what is more effective in teaching kids how to behave in the way that we would like them to and have really great social skills is to give specific positive feedback. So good girl or good boy, whilst unlikely to be damaging, it doesn't actually tell the child what they did that was the right thing. Whereas we want to be a bit more specific and more detailed on what the child has done because we want to use this in a teaching manner. We want to use our feedback and our specific positive feedback to teach the kid exactly what they did that was the right thing so that they've got the best chance of doing it again and being successful the next time. We want to focus on effort and improvement and contribution. We do try to avoid competition and comparison between children, so you are the best is kind of a comparison. There's only one best. But we really want to focus on that specific and detailed feedback to give kids the most information about what they did that was successful. So there's a really nice little poster here that I've put the hyperlink to where I found this called the Praise Makeover of examples of kind of some non-examples of the before and the after, how we can give our traditional praise statements a little bit of a makeover and make them more specific and more detailed feedback. So instead of saying great job, if we say something like you kept trying even when the problems became harder, that's much more specific feedback to the child of what they did. So we're going to go through how we can use these kind of resources and how we can give our praise statements a little bit of a makeover just to make them the most effective that they can be for helping our kids be successful. So why do we want to give positive specific feedback or specific positive feedback? Doesn't matter which order you put those words in. It's a powerful tool for building kids' self-esteem and a good sense of self, but it also increases the likelihood that kids will achieve behaviour success. It increases the likelihood that kids are going to do the behaviours that we have defined that we want them to do at our service. So the recommended ratio of positive feedback to corrective feedback is 4:1. In some places you'll see it as 3:1, in some places you can see it as 5:1. It's kind of around that range of somewhere between 3 and 5 positive statements for every time you correct a child. Totally okay to correct a kids because they're learning and correction is part of learning. But we want to try and keep that ratio of many more positive statements and positive acknowledgements to every time we have to give one of those corrections. For kids who have had a tough start in life, kids that may have experienced trauma or neglect, they actually need a much higher ratio. Observations of teachers who do a really great job in helping their kids be successful when those kids come from really traumatized backgrounds indicates that they use as many as 15 positive acknowledgements for every time they use a correction. They still do correction and it's okay to do correction, but they have many, many more acknowledgements of kids' social and behavioural success than they do corrections. So that's kind of the message here is we want to be giving that specific positive feedback when kids get their behaviour right. We can comment when they make an error and we can teach them what to do instead, but we really want to be commenting on when they get it right so they know what to do again. So there's three strategies that we're going to talk about in this module for changing our verbal feedback to make it more specific acknowledgement rather than just praise. So instead of saying good job, what are some things we can do instead? So in your handout you have some of this information and I'll show you some as well. So the first strategy is to report what you see. So this is being specific about what exactly the kid did. So instead of saying, good girl, you would say, oh, you put your dishes in the washing up tub. So you're telling the kid exactly what they did that was the right thing to do. Or you figured out a solution to the problem. Or thanks for putting your hat away in your cubbyhole. Whatever we say, we want to be specific in our comments so we can see what the kids are doing and we're repeating back to them what they did that was the right thing. So kids don't have to try and figure it out for themselves what was the right thing to do. We'll tell them exactly what was right. So that's beneficial for the child that you're talking to, but it's also beneficial for other children who might be a bit unsure of what to do. They're hearing that specific feedback go to that child about, oh, that kid put their dishes in the washing up tub. That's what I might do as well. So we want to be specific so that kids don't have to guess at the right behaviours. We're telling them exactly what they did was correct. The next strategy is to connect this with our service expectations. So if you've done phase 1, you will have service-wide behaviour expectations like be respectful or be friendly or we are kind or we are good friends, but you'll have that whole service language of 2 or 3 behaviour expectations. So if I say to a 2-year-old, all right, thanks for being responsible, that doesn't mean a whole lot to that kid. But if I connect that big picture language of responsible, our expectation, with exactly what the child did, then the child can learn what are the behaviours that go with being responsible, what are the things that I'm doing that are leading me to be a responsible person. So we can connect the narrating, the what did the kid do, with our expectation. So something like you cleaned up the blocks, you're keeping the area really safe. That would be specifically what the kid did and how that fits with how we are at our service, our expectations. Or you gave Yunseo the fire truck, that's being really friendly. So it's what the kid did and where that fits with our big picture expectations language. So that's the second strategy. The third strategy is to emphasise the impact that the child's behaviour is having on others. So we do this quite a bit when kids make behavioural errors. So things like you belted your friend and now they're feeling really sad. But we want to use that same strategy of increasing empathy when kids do the right behaviours, when kids are behaviourally successful. So we want to acknowledge the positive impact that kids can have on other people with their behaviour as well. So for example, if a kid puts away the toys, you might want to say, "You cleaned up the blocks. Thank you so much for being respectful. Now someone else can have a go." So you kind of added those three strategies together. What was it the child did? Where does that fit with our service behaviour expectations? And how does that positively impact someone else? You don't always have to say all that many words at once, because sometimes it feels like you're doing a lot of words with the kids. So the second example, you gave Yunseo the fire truck. He looks really happy to have it. They haven't used the service behaviour expectations, but you can't every single time. It's okay to just do one out of these strategies or two of these strategies or all three of these strategies. So sometimes we just narrate what the kid did. Sometimes we connect that narration to our service behaviour expectations, and sometimes we add in the impact on others to emphasise the agency of the child in making positive changes in their world. So 3 strategies that we put together in order to give the most effective verbal praise. So the activity now, when we're using positive feedback and encouragement, we want it to be contingent on the appropriate behaviour. So the behaviour happens first and then we give the feedback. We want it to be descriptive, explaining to the child what they did. And we want it to be conveyed with enthusiasm, that we celebrate kids' behavioural success as being just as valid and just as important and just as awesome as their success with other things that we're trying to teach them, like writing their name or pre-literacy behaviours or learning how to ride a bike. Behavioural success is just as important as that, so that we have that enthusiasm when we're delivering that verbal specific feedback. So now it's time for the activity. So in a minute I'll get you to pause this and take about 5 to 10 minutes to plan some really good specific positive feedback statements for using in your service. So on page 1 of your handout that accompanies this presentation, there's some examples of the strategies, so narrating, using the expectation language and adding the positive impact on others. I want you to press pause on the video now and give yourself 5-10 minutes on a timer to develop some statements that you can use that have all of those criteria in them. Okay. Hopefully everybody's had the chance to write some specific positive statements. Now we're going to look at reinforcement systems. So the purpose of reinforcement systems is actually for us as the adults. Some of us are really used to giving great specific feedback, and that's wonderful. Some of us are already doing it at the ratio of 4-to-1 or 5-to-1 or 15-to-1 with correctives, but some of us need a little bit of help and reminder to practice those skills. So we have these reinforcement systems where we're giving structures for us to give that acknowledgement to children, and they're kind of for the kids, but they're mostly for us to remember how to do it. So in this particular example, we've got an individual reinforcement system. We've got, you can see here, CJ is being respectful by taking turns with Griffin, way to go, and then they've got a photo. This could be an acknowledgement that goes home to parents, or it could be something that is kept at the service and kept on the wall. They've used the strategy of giving specific feedback and they've linked it to the behaviour expectation of the service, which is being respectful. The system that they've built is that they've done a couple of things. Firstly, they've got the cards ready to go and in the classroom where they're easy to get to. That's really, really important. If we don't have those cards somewhere where it's easy to get to, people won't use them because people are flat out in education. So the system that they've built is, the first thing is having the physical stuff that the educators need in order to be able to do this practice of giving specific verbal feedback. The second thing they've done is they've obviously taught their staff what do they want on those cards. They want a photo, they want the specific feedback about what the child is doing, and they want the behaviour expectation of the service. So they've invested time in teaching their staff, this is how we're going to do it. So we need to, if we want staff to be using that specific feedback, we need to think about how can we build a system that makes it easy for staff to be successful in giving specific positive feedback. and in sending that home to parents possibly, which you may or may not choose to do. You might choose to keep it in the service or you might choose to send it home to parents. Depends on what's the right thing for you. This service has made a kindness tree. So they have kindness as one of their important behavioural expectations. So they have lots of celebrations of when the kids are kind. And that can be something that's kept in the service, or this version here is being a super friend. I was kind, I was helpful, I did it, and these kind of things can go home to celebrate that child being a super friend. I think this could possibly be a little bit more specific about exactly what the child did to be helpful, exactly what the child did to be kind, but it's an example of a service having these reminders of the love hearts to help the adults remember to acknowledge the children, because you're very busy in your days as educators. So we need to have something that helps remind us, oh yeah, I've got to be looking for this child doing these behaviours so that I can acknowledge them with the love hearts or whatever their system is. In this particular service, they have a post box. Their service behaviour expectations are being respectful and being safe. And so they have these cards that are already printed out, and each of the staff members have them in their classrooms so that it's easy for them to look around and see kids who are being respectful or safe. So these are reminders for staff. These cards that are having them pre-printed are reminders for staff of, oh yeah, I've got to be looking for kids doing respectful or safe things. This is an example of the individual specific feedback that goes with that. So Sean was a super friend because he left housekeeping to allow others to get in. So I think the language I would use there would be left the home corner or left the house play area to let others get in. But they've given that specific feedback about what was it that the child did that was the right thing that has caused them to get this good news postcard. So that's really nice because you can imagine that the kids would really engage with bringing mum or dad over to have a look at that at the end of the day, and then that's another opportunity for that specific feedback when the parent is able to add to that acknowledgement of what the child has done correctly. So I want you now to have a look at page 2 of your handout, and I want you to consider some of the individual systems that I've shown you for planning how can we get reminded to give specific positive feedback to the children, to individual children. What are some different ways that you could acknowledge children individually? You might want to use some of the ideas you've seen, or you might want to come up with some of your own ideas. So I'd like you to put a timer on now for about 5 to 10 minutes and have a discussion about how could you acknowledge children individually. After that 5 to 10 minutes, then press play again. Okay, welcome back. Now we're talking about group contingencies for appropriate behaviour. So when kids achieve behavioural success, how can we have some sort of cool experience or acknowledgement for the group? So this classroom has 3 behaviour expectations: be safe, be kind, be responsible. And you can see they've got a bit of a B theme going on. What they do in this classroom is when a teacher sees a child being safe or being kind or being responsible, they give that child the verbal feedback of, hey, thanks for being responsible by putting your shoes away in your cubbyhole or whatever it is. They take a ping pong ball and they put that ping pong ball into the beehive. You can see how high-tech their beehive is. It's an old juice bottle painted brown, which is perfect. It shouldn't be high-tech. It should be easy to use. So they start off the day with a whole heap of ping pong balls on the educator's desk, and every time the educator walks past and sees those ping pong balls, they're thinking, oh yeah, I've got to find a kid who's being safe or being kind or being responsible so that I can comment on it, so that I can put the ping pong ball into the beehive. So when the beehive gets full, then we have a group reward or a group contingency. Now, if you really want to buy stuff, you can, it's okay, but the kind of reward that would be easy to do and practical would be things like doing a round of applause or having a little dance together, or everybody turn around and give your friend a pat on the back, and then we tip the ping pong balls out again put them back in the bucket on the teacher's desk, and the teachers continue looking for children who are being kind or safe or responsible. So our celebration doesn't necessarily have to be anything that costs us money. It can be reading the special book, or it can be doing a cool dance together, or any kind of little action like that that kids will really quite enjoy. So the ping pong balls or the marbles in the jar or the scrunched up pieces of paper in the jar or the pegs in the bucket or whatever you want to do, it's not really about the pegs, it's not really about the ping pong balls, it's about the reminder for us to celebrate kids being behaviourally successful and to recognise the whole group when that happens. So it doesn't need to be tangible items or things that we buy or cost money. It's a reminder for us, I've got to be giving kids that specific positive feedback, and putting the ping pong balls from one place to another is one way to remember to do that. So this particular school, they had a thermometer. So they would track, they used raffle tickets as their reminder for staff to give positive acknowledgement to students. When they got to 2,000 raffle tickets, their plan was that they were going to have a rodeo fun day, which is pretty cool. So you could use something like this, or you could use something really simple and low-tech like the ping pong balls in the jar. You can have a lot of fun with it. So on page 2 of your handout, I want you to spend a bit of time. I'll get you to put a timer on for 5 to 10 minutes. Discuss with your team and jot some notes about different ways that we can acknowledge the whole group for social and behavioural success. Do we want a thermometer? Do we want a marbles in a jar? Do we want a pegs on a washing line? What are we going to do that's going to help to remind us to acknowledge the individual child, but also to acknowledge for the whole group to be able to celebrate behavioural success in the same way we celebrate other successes? So put a timer on now for 5 minutes, press pause on the video, and we'll come back together shortly. Okay, welcome back. So the magic ratio of 3-to-1 or 4-to-1 or 5-to-1, as I've said, it's different in different pieces of research, but the thing that is consistent is the most effective way to support children's development and support their behavioural success is to acknowledge their success more times than we correct their errors. Totally okay to correct errors when kids make them, but we really want to be acknowledging more than we're correcting. So we want to think about different ways that we can increase our ratio. So somebody suggested to me the idea of putting matches in your pocket. So you start the morning with 10 or 20 matches in your right-hand pocket of your pants. And then every time you give a child a piece of positive feedback, you take one match and then put it in your left-hand pocket of your pants, and just see how long does it take you to get to your right-hand pocket being empty and your left-hand pocket being full. So that's one way to do it, to use a physical reminder like matches in your pocket. It's also possible to do peer observations, so to set up partners and stand in the corner of each other's classroom just for 10 minutes and just count and make a tally, like on a post-it note or a scrap piece of paper. Count how many times does a staff member give positive acknowledgement versus how many times does a staff member correct a child on their behaviour. It's okay to correct them, but it's really interesting to get your own ratio, because most people will think, oh no, I'm being really positive, but actually our habit is to acknowledge the things that we want to correct and spend less time on the positive. So peer observation can be a really powerful strategy for finding out where you're currently at with your acknowledgement of positive behaviour and setting a goal to increase your ratio and see how high you can get it. And it's really important that we reward and acknowledge ourselves as staff members. Staff need acknowledgement too. One of our colleagues, Dr. Tim Lewis, has this beautiful quote that staff in education are typically on very lean schedules of reinforcement, which means we often get more correctives than we do positives, which we know is not ideal for development. So we need to build systems so that we can acknowledge staff in the same way that we acknowledge our children. So how can we do that? A few different ways. Setting up a board or something in your staff room for staff shout-outs or staff acknowledgements, so that staff can practice giving that specific observable feedback about something that they appreciate that a staff member has done. These things are really beautiful, and people tend to really treasure getting this kind of specific, genuine gratitude and acknowledgement for things that they have done. So that's one way to do it. Another way to do it is to have a staff skill of the week to observe and appreciate. So, for example, you may be working on pre-corrections as a whole staff. That was module 4 of phase 1. Really great strategy for helping kids with their behaviour. And so you may be working as a whole staff on using more pre-corrections. So what you may do is set up a system where you have a section of the whiteboard in your staff room dedicated to pre-correction, and you would ask everybody in your service to, every time they see a staff member using a pre-correction, go and put a smiley face on the whiteboard. At the end of the week, we'll add up how many smiley faces we have on the whiteboard, and hey, that's how many drinks we might buy for Friday afternoon drinks, or it might be how many Tim Tams we purchase, or it might be how many pats on the back we give each other, but something so that we're acknowledging staff in our services for using the specific strategies that we know are effective to help kids be successful with their behaviour. So specific verbal feedback or specific written down feedback for staff is important on what they're doing, and in particular the skills that we're working on as a whole service. We can also add tangibles to that. So this is a school example. Thanks to Missouri Schoolwide PBS for lending us these resources. This is Dr. Dunham, who is the principal of this particular school, and they set up a system called Dr. Dunham Dollars, where staff could give each other a Dr. Dunham dollar when they saw each other doing particularly fantastic teaching. And what staff could then use their Dr. Dunham dollars for was things that were meaningful and things that staff had identified that they wanted. So if you got 25 Dr. Dunham dollars from your peers where they had acknowledged you doing particularly awesome things, you might get a free pass for duty. If you had 30, you might get the best parking spot for a week. If you had 10, you might get a snack or a candy bar. But similar to what we have for the children, these are not so much about the rewards themselves. These are to remind us as adults to acknowledge our fellow educators, to acknowledge our peers, to give them that specific verbal feedback. Because a genes pass is a really nice thing to have, but what people will treasure more is that specific verbal feedback. So we need to set up systems to make it easy to give that specific verbal feedback to our fellow staff members. So, specific positive feedback is a great strategy that makes a big difference with the kids when they're in our service. And some parents are really fantastic at doing this. Some parents had lots of specific positive feedback when they were kids and they feel really comfortable with this strategy. But some parents could really benefit from us explaining, hey, this is what we're doing with your children and this is how it's helping them. So we want to use tell, providing information to parents about what we're doing with this strategy, and we also might want to use show, modelling in our service how we give specific positive feedback to students. So this is an example of a PBS early childhood service. Their expectations are about being respectful and being honest. You can see they have handouts for parents there, information about different strategies that they're using, and more specifically, this strategy, which I think is really cute, is just examples of specific positive feedback statements that a service used displayed on the entry wall as parents come into the service. So the idea is to catch them being good. I think there's some really nice statements here. Some of them are a little bit less specific than I think would be perfect, but there are some really nice statements in here that it's a lovely thing to share with parents. This is how we can catch kids doing the right thing. This is how we can dedicate our attention to their behavioural success rather than just correcting them when they make errors. It's okay to correct kids when they make errors, but it's much more effective to catch them when they're doing the right thing and comment specifically on what exactly the child is doing that is right. This is another example of information that you can share with parents. I found this on Pinterest, and so I've given you the hyperlink there where the image is. It's not my piece of work, it comes from Thomas Phelan. So just a simple little poster that you can share with parents about praise is actually good for kids, and we want to aim for that 4-to-1 positive to corrective ratio. So I hope that information has been useful. I would like you to finish this session, I would like you to finish by focusing on yourselves as staff members in early education, and I would like you to go back to your handout and look at what can we have as staff as a system where we can recognise each other for the great work that we're doing, where we can recognise each other and give each other that specific positive feedback. So there should be some room on your handout to start making some plans for your staff specific positive feedback and acknowledgement. So I will leave you with that, and I will see you again virtually through the next module for Phase 2, Module 3. Thank you and have a great evening.